Well, Trump is expected to depart the courthouse any moment now. First, let's bring in my panel to weigh in on the week. Joining me now is criminal defense attorney Brian Claypool. You know, Brian, what was so interesting is today was consumed entirely by Pecker being cross-examined about these payments to Stormy, not to Stormy Daniels, but to Karen McDougal. Now, Trump's not charged with anything related to Karen McDougal because he didn't pay Karen McDougal any money, only Stormy Daniels. So it struck me that this is, sort of prior bad acts that this judge erroneously is allowing in. And that is the same basis that led to the reversal of the conviction for sex offenses of Harvey Weinstein. So, the New York highest court is already making it clear we think that sort of stuff is reversible error, and yet that's what Alvin Bragg is presenting, at least today.
Yeah, Greg, great point. I mean, like to Leo's point, I can't figure out whether we're watching Ringling Brothers give a performance in the courtroom, or is this Days of Our Lives, as Leo was referring to. Greg, you're a lawyer, you're a trial lawyer. Leo is. Doug probably. Look, when you have a bad case, right, what do? You try to bring in salacious facts, right, to try to get the jury, like you said, Greg, to think that former President Trump is a dirty, bad guy because he's associated with the National Enquirer and David Pecker. But look, the best trial lawyers have to focus on the elements of the crime. Let's talk briefly about that. When I do a trial, I look at the jury instructions first, right? And that's how I argue my case. That's what Trump's lawyers are doing. Pecker did nothing to move the needle to prove that former President Trump directed somebody to falsify a financial statement. There's no evidence of that in his testimony, let alone any evidence to support that Trump also intended on interfering with the election. In fact, on cross-exam, Pecker said this was more about suppressing a story than it was the election. So their star witness just handed former President Trump a Christmas gift to get this case over with.
Yeah, when Leo is talking about David Pecker's state of mind, Brian, what he's talking about is this set-up, pre-planned question by the assistant DA. At one point, he asked Pecker, are you aware that influencing an election at the request of a candidate is unlawful? And Pecker, who was afraid of getting prosecuted by rogue prosecutors, said yes. Well, under the law and in truth, it is not unlawful to influence an election at the request of a candidate. My Lord, that's what campaigns are all about, to try to influence the voters in an election.
Exactly.
And so the fact is that, Pecker may have thought, oh, yeah, it's against the law. But that doesn't mean anything. And it certainly is not relevant to the state of mind of Donald Trump and his intentions as charged.
Yeah, absolutely, Greg. And weren't you amused by Pecker's other testimony on the stand where he said, I was the eyes and ears for former President Trump for the campaign? Are you serious? Are you kidding me? A successful man like President Trump's going to use a guy like David Pecker with the National Enquirer to be on the lookout throughout this election to protect President Trump. Really? I mean, that was comical, right? And look, you're right. Leo's right. Doug's right. At the end of the day, Pecker handed Trump a victory in this case because he said this catch and kill scheme is legal. There's nothing illegal about what happened here. And does anybody really believe on the planet that somehow Trump was in there conspiring with Cohen to think that somehow we're going to change the election results by somehow hiding the form of this payment? At the end of the day, you've got it right. You got to prove the elements of the crime. There's no evidence adduced by Pecker, and Cohen's going to be a train wreck to show that Trump commanded anybody to falsify a financial. That's the hardest part of their case. And at the end of the prosecution's case, if I'm repping Trump, I'm filing a motion to dismiss the charges and set up an appeal if this judge doesn't grant that motion.
Yeah, Brian, you wanted to say something about that?
Doug, the good news, though, is to Leo's point. Look, usually we don't like lawyers on the jury, but I remember when this case was starting and I did a show, I said this is one case where we really need at least one or two jurors who's very analytical, right? A legal mind, maybe an engineer, somebody who really analyzes things, who's not going to be like somebody who's sitting home watching, soap operas all day, who's going to be caught by all these salacious facts. So that's the good news, that I think we've got a couple jurors on there that can walk the jury through that. The closing arguments will be important to focus on the elements. But I want to leave you with this thought. To Leo's point, he makes an excellent point. For everybody out there listening or watching, I work on a lot of sexual abuse cases, and Greg, I have tried for years to get prosecutors in LA County and other counties to prosecute alleged sexual predators of minors, right, with evidence in their hands. And we've gotten turned down so many times to have prosecutors prosecute real criminals who are sexually assaulting kids. And yet you have a case like this that's wasting taxpayer money, wasting courtroom space, and simply being used to weaponize the political system. It's just heart-wrenching. It really is.
Brian, you're a terrific lawyer, and I'd like to hear what your closing argument would be on behalf of Donald Trump.
Thank you for the compliment, by the way. And Leo, can I steal one of your comments? I'm going to steal one of Leo's suggestions for closing, right? I love his strategy. Let's go get that transcript, Greg. That's perfect. Leo's done that in trial, so have I. Yeah. You go get that transcript. Why? Because it's a tangible piece of paper. I'd put it up on the screen. The jurors look at that. Look, here's what they said. They said they're going to prove this, this, and this. And you know what else I would say? They haven't proved anything, but they didn't give you any evidence in opening at all to show that Trump commanded anybody to falsify a financial statement, number one. And I don't see anything in these transcripts that he also did that with an intent to interfere with an election. So that would be my starting point. Then you know what I would do? I'd go through the witnesses like you just did. A good trial lawyer goes through each one, right? I'd spend about 30 seconds on all of the other witnesses you've talked about. I tell the jury, other than Pecker and Cohen, all of these other witnesses are irrelevant, zero. They don't bring anything to the table. And then you do what we just said. You talk about Pecker. We've already talked about it. He handed us a victory with his testimony. You lock that in, and then I'd say two words in closing about Michael Cohen, convicted felon, and then move on. My last thought, Greg, I hope Trump's legal team has appellate lawyers in this courtroom. I've done that in a couple of my high-profile. I had a couple high-profile criminal cases. I had an appellate lawyer sitting right in the first row. Because what they've got to be doing right now is securing and paving the way, making objections, filing documents during the trial to exclude witness that we don't often hear about, and set the tone for the appeal. So that's really important, too. Yep.
Smart move.
Yeah, Doug,
thank you.
Trump has said, oh, yeah, I want to testify. That's always a bad idea. And I learned the first case I ever tried, when you're winning, sit down and shut up. Yeah. And,
exactly.
So far, I think on the law, they're winning. I mean, they were winning on the law before the case even began. So having Trump on the witness stand, wow, that's a can of worms I would not want to open. How about you?
Greg, that's a great point, because
I think we can, go ahead.
Yeah, just so everybody knows, cross-examination in a jury trial is limited to what is elicited on direct examination. That's the rule, right? But to Leo's point,
tell that to Judge Marchand.
Yeah, right. That's what I'm saying. If Trump went up, if Trump took the stand, which I don't think he should, I'd ask him like three questions, like, did you ever tell anybody to falsify a financial statement? Did you ever tell anybody that you wanted to interfere with this election? No, right? He says no on that. And to Leo's point, prosecutors will get up and ask, about McDougal and Stormy Daniels, and then Trump's lawyers will object and say, objection, beyond the scope of cross-examination. Judge will say, overruled, and then let them have a heyday for 5 hours with Trump, which would also set up, by the way, another appeal. But my vote is Trump doesn't need a testimony. This case, by the law and facts, is in the can. Don't take a risk.
I agree.
Great lawyers out in LA. Brian Claypool, thank you so much
Thank you.
for being with us today.